Song of Memories is a game about a virus outbreak. The virus turns people into these scaly monsters. You might be thinking, wow, this sounds interesting, I'd like that. But that's not all there is to it. The game actually has two sides to it. The first half of the game is purely slice of life. All you'll be doing is going to school, making choices, developing affection, and basically choosing what route you'll end up on. Depending on which girl you have the most affection for, you'll actually get a completely different second half of the game, which is something I actually really thought was cool. The different routes, while making a whole different kind of second half of the game, they all revolve around the same thing, and that's the virus outbreak. It was a really interesting concept because it delivered a lot of content to the user. While they all revolve around similar things, the sequence of events is completely different between them. And the story resolves in a completely different way, usually revolving around the girl that you ended up on the route for. While having a completely different second half of the game depending on your choices sounds like a really good thing, in some ways it actually kind of hurt the game. It did this in two different ways. The first way is that there's not really any sequence to the choices. There's no cause and effect, which is something that I found really annoying. For instance, on one route, person A might get attacked, and then on another route, person B might get attacked. There's not really any relation between your choices and what happens. The story just kind of paints itself completely different depending on what route you're on. While this isn't necessarily a bad thing, it turned the choices into a bit more superficial. It was purely just a matter of getting on that person's route. There wasn't any outcome to your choices. There's no relation between why person A got attacked on this route and why person B got attacked on the other route. It's just purely there for the sake of being different. The second way that it was hurt by this is that the endings kind of followed a blueprint. They all went a similar direction and there wasn't any deep character development or intriguing story elements. It was more just a matter of this is who you chose and so this is how it happened. Don't get me wrong, they're all pretty different to each other, but they all follow the same sequence of events and overall end pretty similarly, even though they've got their own different elements. Everything just kind of goes the same direction. If you've played one, I don't think there's a lot of reason to play others, even though they're all completely different. It almost feels like they've set their aspirations so high that when they couldn't quite deliver such a diverse ending for each person, it just really kind of hurt it. It's because of all this that the story doesn't actually get all that deep. It was interesting, I enjoyed my time, but it's not deep. Now, if you have any problem with sexual themes in visual novels, you're going to want to steer clear of this one. There's no nudity or anything like that, but there's a lot of very sexual images, such as panty shots or side boob and stuff like that. Considering these characters are high school characters, it could potentially make a lot of people uncomfortable. It seems like a miracle that Sony even let it on the PS4. The imagery, as you can see in the video, it uses a living 2D kind of thing. The sprites will actually move and react like actual people. The game description calls this an evolution or the next stage of visual novels. I don't think that's quite right, but it does make an interesting change. The movements feel kind of inorganic and wrong. They don't really feel like actual people moving, they're just kind of on loop. But it's different enough that you can enjoy the change for once. It's a nice variation on the typical visual novel structure. The game actually has a really helpful feature, and that's a chart. On the chart, you can see every single decision in the entire game. You can see where it leads, what it does, and all the little ones you might have missed along the way. I really appreciated this part of the game because Song of Memories is something that has a lot of different routes and different choices. For instance, in this first half of the game, the person you have the most affection points for will often show up at your house in the morning and stuff like that, but the person you have the second most affection for will also have their own scenes. All these different scenes and different aspects are something that this visual novel does really well. No two playthroughs will be the same. It's not a simple matter of choosing choice A and going to route A for it. All the different point systems and affection ratings, they all make a completely different game between each playthrough. I played this long before there was any guides to the different routes, so I had to personally find all these different choices while I was earning the Platinum Trophy. Without the chart, it would have been impossible. There's just that much difference. Something else really unique this game does is there's actual map navigation and combat. The map navigation is pretty simple. You're just going from point A to point B and there might be some fights along the way. And the fights, they're not exactly combat. They're song based. You press the button prompts to sing the song and it kills the enemies. It's not exactly cutting edge, but it's a nice little touch, and it adds a lot of variation in the songs. I think there's something like 30 different songs. But if you don't like these aspects, you can skip them. There's actually a skip option at the start of every single fight in the game. You don't have to fight a single one. Overall, it's a fairly enjoyable game. The story, while interesting enough, it doesn't quite flesh out to much, but there's a lot of creativity in it. If you like slice of life or incredibly varied choices, I'd say give this a go. But if you're looking for something a bit deeper, much stronger story elements and touching twists, all that stuff, you might want to look somewhere else. Because for the most part, the story elements of this game are basically just superficial and there to tie together all the fun other elements.